Welcome to International Management, the podcast that breaks down the core challenges and strategies of global business. Based on Orlando Casabon's scripts for his international management class, each episode offers practical insights, clear strategies, real-world examples, and expert guidance to help you navigate complex global landscapes. For additional resources, visit casabon.com. Now, let's dive into the essentials of international management.
Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we'll be exploring international organizational structures.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
I think so too. So many of you have asked about this. How do companies that operate across borders and cultures even, how do they organize themselves?
It's a pretty complex challenge for these global companies, right?
Huge. And it can really impact their success. Think about it. How do you maintain efficiency on a global scale and still be responsive to all those unique local needs?
Yeah, it is a balancing act for sure. And, when we talk about global companies, we're not just talking about these small startups.
Oh, no, we're talking about the big players like Samsung, Liebherr, British Airways, even Coca-Cola.
Exactly. Those are the companies that have really figured this out.
And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. But first, I got to ask, what are organizational structures and why do they matter so much?
Well, you can think of an organizational structure as the framework or the blueprint for how a company is set up. It determines how tasks are divided, who reports to whom, and how all the different parts of the company work together.
So it's basically like the company's organizational chart, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if they're making smartphones or running airlines. The organizational structure is crucial to how they operate.
Makes sense. So how does this structure change when a company starts to expand internationally? Because I can't imagine it's the same as when they were just operating in one country, right?
Right. So in the early stages of going global, a lot of companies set up what's called a differentiated structure.
Okay. Differentiated structure. Tell me more.
So imagine a company that's already successful in its home market. They've got their marketing department, their finance department, production, everything's running smoothly. Then they decide to go international. Often what they'll do is create a separate international division, almost like a mini version of the company, but specifically focus on international operations.
Oh, I see. So they're basically keeping the international business separate from the domestic business.
Right, at least at first. But as the company grows, their international operations become more complex. That's when they start realizing they could be missing out on some global synergy.
Global synergy. I like that. So what do they do then?
Well, that's when they often shift to what's called an integrated structure.
Integrated structure, got it.
Basically, they start thinking less like a domestic company with some international branches and more like a single global entity.
So instead of being separate pieces, they're more like a cohesive whole.
Exactly. And there are several different types of integrated structures that companies use, each with its own pros and cons. Want to dive into some examples?
Oh, absolutely. Give me all the juicy details.
All right, let's start with the global product structure. A really good example of this is the Samsung Group. They have so many different products, right? Like smartphones, TVs, home appliances, you name it.
Tons of stuff, yeah.
So in a global product structure, the company is organized around those different product lines. And each product division basically has its own global team handling everything: research and development, production, marketing, sales, everything.
So it's like each product division is its own mini company within Samsung.
You got it. And this allows them to become experts in their specific product area, to really focus. And they can adjust their production and marketing based on the specific region they're selling in.
That makes sense. But what about companies that aren't focused on so many products? Say, companies that are more focused on different geographic regions. What kind of structure works for them?
Good question. For them, there's something called the global regional structure. Adecco SA, the staffing company, they use this structure.
Because their business really depends on understanding those local job markets, right?
Exactly. So instead of organizing around product lines, they organize around regions. So they'll have a division for, say, North America, another for Europe, another for Asia Pacific, each with its own team.
Makes sense. So in that structure, each region basically has the power to make decisions based on what's happening in their specific market.
Yeah, pretty much. It helps them be more responsive to their clients and the local market. It's all about being close to the customer and knowing their needs.
Okay, so we've covered product-focused structures and region-focused structures. What about companies that are structured around their core functions, like marketing or finance?
You're talking about the global functional structure. Think about British Airways or SDIHLAG.
They're both global companies with a very specific product or service.
Right, so their organizational structure is set up with global departments for things like marketing, operations, engineering, and finance. Each department then handles its specific function across all of the company's operations around the world.
So it's like they're taking a traditional corporate structure and stretching it across the globe.
Yeah, you could say that. And this structure lets them really leverage their expertise in each function globally. Like if you have a team of really good marketing people, they can share their knowledge and best practices with all the different markets.
Okay, that's a good point. It makes sense for companies who want to maintain a strong brand identity across the board. But what about companies that are more focused on specific types of customers? Some cater to really high-end clients, others to small businesses. Is there a structure for that?
You're right. That's another approach altogether. It's called the global customer structure. Think about Kodak back when they were really big in the film industry. They used this structure.
Interesting. Tell me more about how they did that.
They divided their company based on their customer groups, like professional photographers, the entertainment industry, everyday consumers. Each division had its own dedicated team focused on providing the products and services that specific customer group needed.
It's all about making sure those different customer groups feel like they're getting what they need, right? But I have to say, it seems like real-world companies might not always fit so perfectly into one of these categories.
Oh, you're absolutely right. A lot of companies don't fit neatly into any one structure.
So what do?
They mix and match. We call those hybrid structures. They're basically blending elements from different structures to create something that really fits their unique needs.
That's cool. It's like they're creating their own custom organizational structure. Do you have a good example of a company that's doing that?
And Nissan Motor Corporation, for example, they've kind of combined product-based and regional elements in their structure so they can manage those different car models while also adapting to the different markets all over the world.
Makes sense. It's like a customized puzzle. It's so fascinating, though, isn't it? How companies figure out what structure works best for them, especially when they're operating all over the globe.
Right. I mean, there's really no one-size-fits-all solution. It all depends on the company, their industry, their goals, and the markets they're working in.
It's all about finding that right balance, which I guess is what makes this whole topic so interesting. But you know what I'm curious about now? In these massive multinational companies, who actually gets to make the big decisions?
That is a great question. And that leads us to the age-old debate, centralization versus decentralization.
Yeah, it's a classic dilemma, isn't it? You've got these huge companies with operations all over the world, so where does the decision-making power really lie? At the headquarters, keeping everything centralized and under control? Or do you give more autonomy to those local teams, those subsidiaries who are closer to the action and understand those specific markets?
I can see how that would be a tough call. I mean, too much control from headquarters could stifle creativity and slow down decision-making. But giving too much freedom to the subsidiaries could create chaos and inconsistency, right? It's a balancing act for sure. Every company has to figure out what works best for them. Like, think about a fast food chain. They want to make sure you get the same burger and fries, whether you're in New York or London.
Right. Consistency is key for them.
Exactly. So for a company like that, a lot of the key decisions are made at the headquarters, to ensure that brand consistency, that uniform customer experience.
But what about companies that need to be more agile, more responsive to those local differences? Like a clothing retailer, for example. They probably wouldn't sell the same styles in Paris and Dubai.
You're right. Those companies often lean towards decentralization. They give their local teams the power to make decisions based on what they know about that specific market, adapting to the local trends, the cultural nuances, all of that.
It's about finding that sweet spot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Enough control to maintain consistency, but enough freedom to be flexible and adapt.
Exactly. And it's not always in either situation. A lot of companies actually centralize some functions and decentralize others.
Okay, so it's more nuanced than just picking one or the other.
Right. Like, a company might centralize things like finance and legal, keeping those functions under tight control from headquarters, but they might give more autonomy to their regional marketing and sales teams.
That makes sense. So they're picking and choosing which areas need more centralized control and which areas can benefit from a more decentralized approach.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right mix to be both globally efficient and locally responsive.
This is all really interesting. But we've been talking a lot about headquarters and local teams. What about those subsidiaries? The actual companies operating in all those different countries? What role do they play in this whole structure, and how much power do they actually have?
Subsidiaries are essential. They're the ones on the ground, building relationships with those local customers, dealing with the regulations, and making sure things run smoothly in those specific markets.
So they're not just branches. They're really important players. But how much freedom do they have? Are they making their own decisions, or are they just taking orders from headquarters?
Well, it varies from company to company. Some companies keep a pretty tight rein on their subsidiaries. They see them more like branch offices that have to follow strict guidelines from the headquarters. But other companies give their subsidiaries a lot more autonomy. They operate almost like independent businesses with their own strategies and decision-making processes.
I guess that makes sense. It probably depends on the company's overall strategy and the level of trust they have in their subsidiary leaders.
Yeah, and the type of industry they're in, the level of risk involved. There are a lot of factors to consider.
It sounds like finding the right balance is crucial here too, just like with centralization and decentralization.
You got it. If you give subsidiaries too much freedom, they might start drifting away from the company's core values and goals. They might lose sight of the big picture.
But if you micromanage them too much, they might not be able to adapt to those local conditions.
Right, exactly. They might miss out on opportunities or make decisions that aren't the best fit for that specific market. It really is a delicate dance. You have to find that sweet spot where subsidiaries have enough freedom to be effective, but they're still aligned with the overall goals and values of the parent company.
This reminds me of those subsidiary boards of directors.
Yeah.
What role do they play in all this? Are they calling the shots, or are they more like advisors?
That's a great question. And again, it really depends on the company and the specific subsidiary. Some subsidiary boards are mainly there to provide local insights and feedback to the headquarters. They don't necessarily have much decision-making authority. But other subsidiary boards are way more hands-on, especially when it comes to things like budgeting, hiring, and setting the strategic direction for the subsidiary.
So it's another one of those areas where companies have to find the right balance.
Yeah, you want the subsidiary board to have enough autonomy to be effective, but you also want to make sure they're aligned with the big picture, the overall strategy of the parent company. It's all about finding that right level of control and autonomy.
This is making me think about the bigger picture of coordination in these massive global companies.
Yeah.
With teams all over the world, different time zones, different languages. How do they manage to keep everyone on the same page?
Oh, that's a huge challenge. Coordinating a global company is it's a massive undertaking. It takes a lot of work, a lot of communication.
I bet. With so many moving parts, so many different cultures and ways of working, it must be like herding cats sometimes.
It can be, yeah. But companies use a mix of formal and informal mechanisms to keep everything running smoothly. On the formal side, you have the organizational structure itself.
Right, with the clear reporting lines and responsibility.
Exactly. And then there are things like rules, procedures, standardized processes. All of that is designed to create consistency and predictability.
So it's about having a clear framework in place, even when people are operating in very different contexts.
Right. And you also have the planning and budgeting processes, which are essential for aligning everyone around those common goals, making sure resources are allocated strategically, so that everyone's working towards the same objectives.
Those formal mechanisms make a lot of sense. But I'm guessing there's more to it than just rules and structures, right? What about the informal side of things? How important are those personal connections and relationships?
Those are super important too, especially in today's world where everything's so interconnected. Think about something as simple as picking up the phone to talk to a colleague in another country, or having a video call to brainstorm ideas. Those kinds of interactions build relationships and trust and help information to flow more freely, in ways that formal structures often can't.
So it's about fostering those human connections, building a sense of community, even when people are spread out all over the world.
Exactly. And then there are things like cross-functional teams or task forces, bringing people together from different departments, different countries even, to work on specific projects. It's a way to break down those silos, encourage collaboration, and get people exposed to different perspectives.
It's like creating these little microcosms of the global company, where people can connect and learn from each other and achieve things they couldn't do on their own.
Right. That's a great way to put it.
You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to circle back to: normative integration. What is that exactly, and how does it fit into all of this?
Ah, yes. Normative integration. That's all about building a strong organizational culture. A culture that permeates every corner of the company, no matter where people are physically located. It's about creating a shared understanding, a shared commitment to the company's values, its goals, and even its unwritten rules.
So it's not just about having the right structure or the right processes. It's about creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose that unites everyone no matter where they are.
Exactly. It's about making people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, even if they're thousands of miles away from headquarters. It's often fostered through things like leadership training programs, global communication initiatives, even company-wide celebrations. It's about making people feel connected.
It sounds like normative integration is crucial for creating that sense of unity and shared purpose in a global company.
Absolutely. It's the glue that holds everything together.
This has been so insightful. I'm really starting to grasp the complexity of designing and managing these international organizational structures. But, the world is changing so fast. Technology is evolving. The way we work is changing. What are you seeing on the horizon? What are some of the emerging trends in this field?
Well, one of the biggest trends we're seeing is the rise of agile and networked organizations.
Agile. That's a word we hear a lot these days. But what does it actually mean for these global companies?
It's all about being more flexible, adaptable, able to respond quickly to change. Companies are moving away from those rigid hierarchies and creating structures that are more like networks.
So it's about being more like a speedboat than a giant cargo ship.
Exactly. Agile organizations empower their teams to make decisions, to be more autonomous and collaborative. And technology is a huge enabler of this trend.
That makes sense. With all those online collaboration tools and data analytics platforms, companies can coordinate their global operations in ways that weren't possible before. And speaking of technology changing the way we work, what about remote and hybrid work models? It seems like those are here to stay.
You're right. The pandemic really accelerated that shift. And now a lot of companies are designing their organizational structures around virtual teams and flexible work arrangements.
So the traditional office is becoming less important.
For some companies, yeah. It's more about creating a digital workplace that can connect people from all over the world.
But that must create some challenges, right?
Yep.
Especially when it comes to managing people and maintaining a strong company culture.
For sure. Companies have to find new ways to keep their employees engaged and connected when they're not all in the same physical space. They're focusing more on things like employee well-being, flexible work arrangements, and opportunities for professional development.
So it's about creating a work environment that people actually want to be a part of,
Yeah.
even if it's virtual.
Right, and companies are realizing that happy employees are productive employees.
It's not just about the bottom line anymore. It's about creating a workplace where people feel valued and supported. And speaking of things that are changing the business landscape, data-driven decision-making is another big one, right?
Oh, absolutely. Data has become like a strategic asset for companies. They're using it to understand their customers better, optimize their operations, make smarter decisions across the board.
But it's not just about collecting data. It's about knowing how to analyze it, how to extract those valuable insights.
Exactly. That's why we're seeing companies investing in data analytics platforms, hiring data scientists, really building that data-driven culture.
It's like they have this powerful new tool at their disposal, but they need to know how to use it effectively.
Right. And it's not just about profits and efficiency either. There's also a growing focus on sustainability and social responsibility.
Yes. It seems like every company is talking about their commitment to sustainability these days. But is it just talk, or are they actually making real changes?
I think companies are realizing that sustainability is not just a nice to have anymore. It's becoming a necessity. Consumers are demanding it. Investors are demanding it. It's becoming part of their brand image and their reputation.
So it's not just about doing a few green initiatives. It's about integrating sustainability into every aspect of the business.
Exactly. It's about setting ambitious sustainability targets, reducing their environmental impact, ensuring ethical sourcing practices. It's about making those changes throughout the entire supply chain.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And companies are realizing that it's not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business. It can attract talent, improve customer loyalty, and even reduce costs in the long run.
So sustainability is not just about being a good corporate citizen, it's also about being a smart and successful business.
Right. It's about creating value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure. It's such a fascinating topic.
Before we go, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners? Any key takeaways they should remember?
Just remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to designing international organizational structures. It's about finding the right balance for your company and your specific situation. And it's an ongoing process, It's not something you set and forget. You have to be willing to adapt and evolve as the world changes around you.
So be flexible, be open to new ideas, and never stop learning. That's great advice. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of international organizational structures. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the ever-changing world of global business.